Greetings, Ladles and Jelly Spoons. Welcome back to Kohigh Mathy's YouTube channel from all of us here at the Orbital Broadcast Bunker, Britain's first and only airborne subterranean studio. Let me just say, Happy New Year. Right, that's enough of that. Where have you all been for the last 4 months? I left some milk out on side in August. Come back, it's got its own bloody ecosystem. Indeed, it has been some time. So whilst Tiger Tom sorts through all the posts that we've had and Keith puts the kettle on, allow me to wax lyrical about my top games of 2021. That doesn't seem right. Sorry, yes, my top 3 games from the year 2001, when my main hobby was playing the hottest new video games around. Well, what's your hobby now? Talking about old video games that were once the hottest new video games around. At number 3, Onimusha Warlords, or simply just Onimusha in Japan. Capcom's Sengoku Resident Evil survival horror with samurais. What's not to love? Being the proud owner of an imported PlayStation 2, I was lucky enough to get this on import fresh from Japan not long after its release. Whilst the text and the menu system eluded me, due to it all being in Japanese, the game and the cutscenes were presented in English. I'd had a lot of fun with Dino Crisis, and the thought of a historical survival horror game set in Japan felt like the video game gods were answering a prayer just for me. The story might be silly, but then again so is every survival horror video game's story. The gameplay, the mechanics, the weapons, they all just clicked. Whilst I don't play the game very often these days, after covering it for my retrospective review, link in the description down below, I've spent a good few hours with it in 2021. Probably as much as I did back in 2001. I'm just glad that I can finally read the menus.
Flee while you can, you worthless bug!
Number 2. Metal Gear Solid 2. One of the games that I sadly didn't get to cover at the end of 2021. And what a game. Published and developed by Konami. Don't, I'm not in mood. Released in 2001 and re-released in the Metal Gear Solid HD collection in 2011, the story follows on from the events of Metal Gear Solid, but not in the way that fans were hoping. A massive offshore cleanup facility is seized by a group of terrorists who call themselves the Sons of Liberty. They demand an enormous ransom in exchange for the life of the President of the United States and threaten to destroy the facility and create a cataclysmic environmental disaster if their demands are not met. Whilst at first you play as series mainstay Solid Snake, the game quickly puts you into the shoes of series new boy Raiden. It's fair to say that Western audiences didn't care much for the new protagonist, however he was far better received in Japan. Oh, come on lad, wrap it up, it's not a retrospective review you know, come on. Get to point. Okay, sorry. Again, this is a game that I got fresh off the import boat from Japan and spent Christmas 2001 playing. I have to admit that I was also taken back a little bit by the new protagonist. So much so that I think I spent a few days playing the tanker section again and again just to play as Solid Snake whilst playing through the rest of the game itself. It's classic Hideo Kojima at his best in my opinion, and at the time I thought it was the closest I was ever going to get to an honest to God James Bond game.
There's room for only one snake and one big boss.
Before I reveal my top game of 2001, I just want to give out a few honourable mentions. First off, Silent Hill 2, for being the best survival horror game of 2001. Even if I personally preferred Onimusha, Silent Hill 2 is without doubt one of the best games not only of the year, but also of the decade.
I'm sorry. It's not your problem.
I hope you find them.
Yeah, you too.
And also, how can you talk about video games in 2001 without mentioning Shenmue 2? Whilst the court of public opinion has certainly changed over the years, I still think that Shenmue 2 at the time was one of the finest games released in 2001. Again, sadly I didn't get to cover it properly, but it's just such a video game classic that it's worth mentioning.
Damn you! Damn you! Ah!
And my top game of 2001 was, and still is, Final Fantasy X. Squaresoft, as it was at the time's 10th game in the Final Fantasy franchise, and the first Final Fantasy game released for the PlayStation 2, and the first game in the series to have fully 3D backdrops and locations, and the first game in the series to introduce voice acting. That didn't release in Blighty until 2002. That didn't release in Blighty and... Okay, technically Final Fantasy X didn't reach European shores until 2002, and whilst I was given the option to get the Japanese import, a story-driven game with an in-depth menu system seemed a bit of a tall order if it was all going to be in Japanese. In 2002 I was working as a telephone repairman. Every lunchtime for the best part of 3 months I would rush home and get through as much of the game as I could in 2 hours before heading back to work. As a long-time Final Fantasy fan, the game blew me away with its graphics, kept me gripped with its story, and made me laugh with its voice acting. The conditional turn-based battle system just seemed so next-gen at the time, and the sphere grid levelling system that you could lose yourself in for hours was such a step up from what we'd had previously. I can see why so many Final Fantasy fans have it as their favourite Final Fantasy game in the series. Fantastic. Right, so where have you been? I'm only asking because we've had this letter from Gasboard, and it appears that someone, naming no tigers, forgot to turn gas off before we left. Indeed, where have we been? Well, that's a fantastic. Whilst Kai and Pat waxed lyrical because I still wanted a certain amount of production value in this video, but I thought it was about time that I did a No Frills channel update. I'd just like to say a thank you to all of you who have subscribed and commented on videos whilst I've been away. And of course a very special thank you to all of you who have been with me from the beginning. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible. So, why the channel silence? At the tail end of last year I changed jobs and took on a somewhat more demanding position. Not only that, but the new job's location is a lot further away from home. So YouTube really had to take a back seat until I was settled in the role and I could work out a new routine for making videos. It wasn't a decision that I made lightly, as I had spent a good long time working on some videos that are now very sadly out of date as far as 20th anniversaries go. I also missed out on some games that I was really looking forward to covering, such as Soul Reaver 2, GTA 3, Civilization 3, the first Jak and Daxter game, as well as Shenmue 2 and Metal Gear Solid 2. Not only that, but we missed out on the 20th anniversary of Nintendo's GameCube, as well as the original Xbox. But it's not all bad news. Normally when I end up having to take a sudden hiatus, the channel tends to stagnate and I tend to lose subscribers. This time, however, I've actually picked up a few, and I'm very pleased to say that we are now over the 250 subscriber mark. It might not seem a lot in the grand scheme of YouTube these days, but it has made me very, very happy and somewhat stunned that there are over 250 of you out there that seem to enjoy my mad ramblings about old video games. So thank you so much to all of you for your support. Hopefully you'll be all sticking with me in the new year and enjoying what I have coming up. Whilst I have some new video ideas in the works, for the most part it's just going to be back to business as usual with the 20th anniversary retrospective reviews and the retro roundups each month. Hopefully you will have seen the first new project at the end of last week, my 5-minute Friday facts. A little video to end your week on, and I do hope that you're enjoying them. They are allowing me to have a 5-minute ramble about some of the games over the last few years that I've missed out on covering. Be sure to look out for some other little video series throughout the year. Now, one question that I have had from the community, sort of, is about streaming. For those of you that don't know, during 2020 and 2021 I dabbled with a little bit of Twitch streaming. However, if you're going to try and get into streaming in this day and age, the first thing that you have to consider is a streaming schedule. And at the moment, I'm unable to stick to any kind of schedule. So streaming would be very ad hoc at best. My other concern is that when I was streaming solo, everything felt very forced. The best streams I had were the board game streams with some chums, so whilst it remains an interest of mine, it's not something that I can put 100% effort into at the moment. But that might change, and if you're inclined to follow me over on Twitch, the information is in the description down below, and that's where you'll also find all my other social media information as well. For if there is one New Year's resolution for this channel, it is to be more active on other social media platforms. So please do consider following me on Instagram, Twitter, although I do have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Twitter. Feel free to join my Discord, small though it is at the moment, and also I have a TikTok for my sins. I have learnt that now, in the year of our Lord 2022, TikTok isn't so much a place to try and make it as a creator, it's a place to have arguments. Anyway, I've taken up far too much of your time. Let's get back to Kai and the gang. Back to you in the studio. Thank you, Alan. Now, hang on, something doesn't seem right here. Right, we've been gone so long, some little tark has been buggering about with settings. I'm going to miss Emmerdale Farm at this rate. If I don't find out who Kim's shagging, plus if anything can be done about drainage in lower fields, I will not be happy. But just out of interest, what were your games of 2021? Okay, since you asked. At number 3 it would be Humankind.
That's one small step for man, one
a turn-based strategy 4X video game developed by Amplitude Studios and published by Sega. The game was released in August and is possibly the best God Sim I've played in a long time. It's certainly a game that could knock the Civilization series off its post as my preferred God Sim series. At number 2, Hitman 3. It's not often that I'm still playing a game that came out at the start of the year at the end of the year, but Hitman 3, indeed the more recent Hitman reboots, have been fantastic. I spoke earlier about ever getting an honest-to-God James Bond game. At the moment, the Hitman series is the closest you're going to get, and how excited are we that IO Interactive, the people behind Hitman, have got the license to make a James Bond game. Well, very, providing I can get this thing working. Oh! Keith, it started! And at number 1, I'm sure it comes as no surprise, my top game of 2021 was Resident Evil Village.
Resident Evil.
The 8th, technically 13th game in the main series came out swinging in 2001 with its follow-up to 2017's Resident Evil 7. It very much feels like Resident Evil Village was to Resident Evil 7 what Resident Evil 2 was to the original Resident Evil. Bigger, better and more kick-ass. Whilst some didn't like the more action-packed set pieces and were a little bit perturbed that the game's poster villain only really features in a small portion of the game, I simply adored it. All of the villains in the game had their own pros and cons, but they all felt like they'd been thought out. The moment-to-moment gameplay was amazing, because it was all so varied depending on which villainous lord of the village you were facing off against. It wasn't perfect by any means, there were some bits that I thought fell short, and whilst I'm not going to spoil it, the ending didn't do much for me. But without doubt, my 2021 Game of the Year was Resident Evil Village.
It's just a local tale.
And with that, I think it's time to bring this video to a close. Thank you so much for watching. Please do let us know what you thought in the comment section down below. Be sure to click the like button, and if you're not already, why not help out the channel by subscribing and clicking that bell so that you know the next time that we upload a video. I think it'll be Friday. So once again, Happy New Year, and we'll see you Friday.